What does it actually mean to belong to a country? I mean, really belong. And what if that belonging, that citizenship, could just be taken away? Well, today, we're diving into a fascinating UK Supreme Court case that grappled with those very questions. Yeah, at the very heart of this whole legal drama is a really haunting idea: the concept of being a citizen of nowhere. Just stop and think about that for a second. Could the government of the only country you call home just turn around and say, nope, you're not one of us anymore? And this isn't some philosophical thought experiment. This was the real, high stakes question that made it all the way to the UK's highest court. And this whole question, it was brought into incredibly sharp focus because of the story of one man. His case, Pham versus the Home Secretary, would end up defining the very limits of a government's power. Okay, so before we get any deeper into this, we have to get our heads around a key term: statelessness. And look, this isn't about just feeling like you don't belong. No, this is a very precise, very serious legal status. It means you are not recognized as a citizen by any country on earth. It is quite literally a terrifying legal limbo. So, who was Mr. Pham? Let's walk through his journey. He was born in Vietnam back in 1983. Then, as a kid in 1995, he becomes a British citizen. The UK was his home, you know? But then, in 2011, things take a sharp turn. Allegations of involvement in terrorism surface, and the UK Home Secretary makes a pretty drastic decision to completely revoke his British citizenship. So, what was the government's reasoning? Well, it was pretty direct. They argued that their number one job, their paramount duty, was to protect national security. And in their view, that duty gave them the power to take a step this extreme. And right there, you have it. That sets up the fundamental conflict at the core of this whole case. It's a head-on collision between two massive principles. On one hand, the international rule against making someone stateless, and on the other, a country's right to protect itself. So the legal battle lines were drawn really clearly. Mr. Pham's side was arguing, look, you just can't do this. Depriving someone of their only citizenship is illegal because it makes them stateless. Simple. But the Home Secretary's argument was just as forceful. National security comes first. It allows us to revoke citizenship, even if it results in someone becoming stateless. Now, you might be wondering, where does the government even get this power? Well, they base their authority on this really interesting piece of UK law called the royal prerogative. The best way to think about it is like a set of old customary powers, kind of inherited from the monarch, that the government can still use for big national issues, things like national security. So with these two powerful arguments clashing, the case made its way all the way to the top. It's time to see what the Supreme Court decided. Let's find out how they navigated this incredibly complex legal minefield. And listen to this. This is a quote from one of the Supreme Court judges, Lord Sumption. He said, "The common law has long recognized the despair and human misery which statelessness entails. It is a torment to be a citizen of nowhere." Wow. I mean, words like despair, misery, torment, that shows you right away that the court saw this as way more than just some abstract legal puzzle. They got the real human cost. Okay, so here's the final decision, and you've got to pay close attention because it is really nuanced. First, the court made a huge landmark ruling. The government cannot lawfully make a person stateless, period. They said this is a fundamental principle of UK common law, and that's a massive win for the idea that everyone has a right to a nationality, right? But, and this is the crucial twist, the court then said the burden was on Mr. Pham to prove he would actually become stateless, and they just weren't convinced that he'd automatically lost his Vietnamese citizenship. So what was the final outcome? Well, Mr. Pham actually lost his personal appeal, but the fundamental principle he was fighting for, that was affirmed and is now set in stone. Wild, right? So a ruling that complex, it naturally leaves us with some much bigger questions, right? Questions that go way beyond just this one case. It really forces all of us to ask, what does it even mean to be a citizen? And that's really the legacy of the Pham case. It's this two-sided coin. On one hand, it drew a super important line in the sand, right? It put a clear limit on government power. But on the other hand, it also showed us just how fragile citizenship can be. It's not this unbreakable, ironclad right. It's a legal status that can actually be questioned, debated, and even taken away. You know, this whole case is a perfect example of the tightrope that modern societies are always walking. It's that constant, delicate balancing act between the rights of the individual and the security of the state. And the Pham case? It sits right on that knife's edge. So let's end with this final thought. In one sense, the court protected everyone from what it called the torment of being a citizen of nowhere. But the case itself is also a stark reminder, isn't it? If that one thing, your citizenship, the very thing that ties you to a nation, can be questioned and even taken away, what does it truly mean to belong? That's a question this case leaves for every single one of us to think about.